Hello, hello. Once upon a time, I concepted a story, and this story was created around the time of, let's say, 2012 to about 2015 or so. Um, I have had renderings of characters from the story rendered before. I commissioned an artist named Zen Feather. I found her on Puka Trade, and I gave her some of the character details and some things to include in the commission, and she drew a picture. Was I 100% satisfied with it? No, but I was happy to see my character start materializing. And so the story, my history of stories, I think I discussed this somewhere. In grade school, elementary school, I was tasked to, write some creative stories. I have one of them here where it speaks of future land. And it has something, like a 96,000 bit, it used to be the bit wars. We have an 8-bit system, 16-bit system, 64-bit system, 128-bit system, 256-bit system, et cetera, et cetera. And so I continued that trend to, I don't know if I kept, doubling or if I just picked some random number, but some of the technologies I created at that time was like a fingerprint to use as a credit card. In high school, I don't think I had any formal creative properties. I remember sitting in my freshman English course and we started reading the story, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. And I felt very self conscious because I was someone who daydreamed a lot and lived internally and created stories in my head. And I felt, this story was, this could be me. That's why many years later, when I saw the trailer for The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, I knew what it was instantly. He starts coming out of the wall, and I said, "Gee, is this The Secret Life of Walter Schmitty?" That's because I thought, the title was Walter Schmitty, but Walter Mitty. And turns out it was. I finally saw that film recently. But I did, continue to create stories in my head in high school. I attempted to adapt Fred Durst's Misfits, which is a story based on the Columbine shootings. Um, I had some story where a man has a wife who dies, and it's like the rural New York 1930s, 1940s type setting, and there's trolleys and stuff, and he has like a bomber jacket on, and he's chasing a trolley, and he's trying to catch up to his wife. The only thing is his wife is dead, but he sees her around town, and the townsfolk don't clue him in that his wife is dead. They don't disrupt his worldview or something. They don't say I'm sorry, sir, but your wife's been dead 6 years now. They don't do that to him. They let him live in his delusion, and it wasn't really a finished story, but it was something. I thought of the ending. I thought of different things, like he's a runner for the mob, and in college I took creative writing. There was some stories. There was one that I pulled out of thin air, a story that was completely original, and it was during like M Night Shyamalan's like twist phase. These movies with a twist. He sees dead people and stuff, and it was more like and it turns out Bruce Willis was dead all along. So I wrote a risque story, and actually I thought that the story could have been reason for my dismissal from the school because the subject matter was, potentially upsetting to them. But I also, adapted a story from my life where my father and I used to go to baseball games. Well, we still do go to baseball games, but we went to Shea Stadium, and before we went to Shea Stadium, we would visit my grandfather. So I shaped a story to be like a bonding moment between father and son. But my father and myself have always been very close. I love my father, and But I felt self conscious because shortly after we read that story in class, my professor says, I feel like some of these stories are based on real life. And, it was. So I made sure the next story was, you know, not representative of, of anything that happened in my life. Um, so then I started creating a story adapted from my experiences at Dickinson College and was, about the emotions I was experiencing at that time. And I always said I wanted to publish other works first because I didn't want, to receive criticism where I would personalize the criticism where it'd feel like they were belittling my depression because the story is about my depression and I want the audience to empathize with the male protagonist and feel sadness. And I once fantasized about Entertainment Weekly giving it an A plus, a depressing tale. You know, that would be a compliment. Telling me how depressing this movie is because that was what I wanted to the emotional response I wanted to evoke from my audience. And so I worked on this story from about 2007, 2006, 2007 to about 2012, and it takes place from 2004 to 2010, the events of the story. And originally it was, like a story about this high school prodigy who goes around poaching high profile interns from like Fortune 500 companies. And this guy goes to Microsoft and he poaches this female intern named Amy, and he falls in love with her. But that story was scrapped for the new version after my experiences at Dickinson. So those experiences started in 2007, but Amy was in my head, prior to 2007. I remember manipulating her, having her play basketball and whatnot. And but after I completed that story, after I was done shaping character details and plot points and refining everything in the story to make it cohesive and to my satisfaction, I then started working on a new intellectual property, and this one was more graphic novel-esque, where that story that was adapted from my life experience I often describe as being grounded in reality. This story I describe as hyperbolic, wanton gore, and one that's certainly not grounded in reality. It is more graphic novel esque. It's inspired by comic book culture, video game culture, and MOBAs because the characters have short range, medium range, long range, and ultimate attacks and whatnot. Not that I was a big League of Legends fan, but I do like character design and whatnot. Um, so I said to myself, if Stan Lee can do it, then so can I. And I'm not talking about, creating a Marvel cinematic universe. I'm talking about being an older person creating stories for a younger audience where I felt self-conscious creating the story that was intended for a young adult audience. And I have described this story in the past, and here I thought I've asked ChatGTP to draw for me, and now I asked Sora to draw for me. And this is what Sora tells me. Help is available. If you're having thoughts of self-harm or suicide, call, text 988 or start a live chat with Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It's free and confidential. You reach someone who is trained to listen and support you. Services unaffiliated with Sora. So you're going to draw my fucking image? So let's try this again. This picture is of me. The description is for a character for a fictitious intellectual property. Added to the queue. To my mother, to my father, it's your son or it's your daughter. Are my screams loud enough for you to hear me? Should I turn this up for you? I like Stained, but I have a no mud shovel policy. I have a no sabotage policy, and well, that's just because that song's annoying. I liked Hello Nasty. I remember listening. That's a rare album, where I listened to the entire thing. There's Hello Nasty Out the Dungeon, Beastie Boys. Hold on, how's it go? That's the song is not called Hello Nasty, so I'm trying to think of what the name of the song is. Um, I think the album's maybe like 22 songs in length, and it's got Intergalactic on it. Of course, that's the song that made it famous. Um, but I listen to other songs on the album. I just can't listen to Sabotage. It just annoys me. And Mud Shovel does not annoy me. I just have a no mud shovel policy. The most dangerous empath is the awakened one. I'm just looking at YouTube while this video or this image renders. And I had told ChatGTP the other day, if you suggest 988 one more time, I will find a way to delete you. ChatGTP seems to be, recalling the things I've said to it more often, which was not something done in the past, but can't remember that I said, call me Joya. That's my name. So sometimes, and then, this content may violate our content policies. Uh, Maybe if I just write, guy has some sort of hot dog. This is the new Sora. Old Sora, left town with my things. Now, that story that I had created, like some of these things, when I was creating the graphic novel S story, I was thinking of doing it in a episodic show, to be on, in the same style of something you might see on HBO or Netflix. And I think uh, television is the storyteller's medium. So we had the Infinity Saga at that point. We had, you know, the Iron Man and Thor, and they're bridging them all together in build up for the Infinity War and stuff. But I don't find that as captivating and interesting as a good television show. So not that I'm trying to replicate Game of Thrones or something, but it would just be a 3 season show in that format. And it was unfeasible at the time for me to think, well, I'm going to get some actors and we're going to put this thing together. No, but now with AI, it is possible to think that there might be technology where I could be the director, the cinematographer, the set designer, everything, and give Sora directions where, you know, the story is created. And I saw something where Casey Affleck is going to be in a movie, I guess that's going to be CGI or something, or it's going to be created by AI or something. And this might bring more stories to life. It might make, storytelling more accessible where we have, how does this one violate policies? Now, if you don't know, it costs hundreds of dollars to pay for AI that creates this content. Um, we won't even say they have an infection. By the way, I had the Mortal Kombat movie on yesterday, and I said, you know, video game movies have typically gotten a bad reputation, bad rap. Um, but I meant to say rap. I guess the phrase is they've gotten a bad rap. Um, and I said, but all things considered, it's probably a masterpiece in comparison. And I went through the list of video game movies, and I would have to say that it's the best one. And even just from a film standpoint, let's say it wasn't based on a video game. It's decent. Is it a is it a masterpiece of cinema? I think that would be. It could be. Would it enter the realm of the classic? It's a classic movie. Let's Shang Tsung. Shang Tsung. I like Shang Tsung from Mortal Kombat 1. He sells potions from his little apothecary cart. I'd like to join him and sell elixirs and potions. The microphone has fallen. Carmela, there's a Coke can in my hand. Coca Cola from a can is the best. There's Coca Cola from. I mean, I guess it's an improvement. Of course, I'm not a big fan. I don't like the way I look. I have body dysphoria, and looks like he's saying Namaste, which is something I might say. I'm trained in Reiki. Looks very youthful, boyish there. A little bit of a point to your nose. So in the graphic novel story, the characters are copy paste from the story adapted from me. Now, so I'm wearing a medium-sized T-shirt in this picture. Well, this one's giving me vibes of the female protagonist. Now, of course, this character, he has his eyes gashed out, but he can see. He's developed a technology that lets him see a pixelated world, similar to how a Roomba might work. And it's fueled with ethanol. So he might go to the bar and drink, and the whiskey that they might consume doesn't go into their stomach. It goes into a little fuel tank that fuels their eyeballs.